Welcome everybody. I see some familiar names here. It's great to see all of you. Welcome to the first edition of Music Matters. It's a new endeavor for us here at Northeastern Pennsylvania Chamber Music Society. Thrilled to be doing this, and it's going to be an experiment for all of us, and I'm excited to see what happens. This program, Music Matters, is made possible in part by a grant from the Pennsylvania Foundation on the Arts, or excuse me, Council on the Arts, as well as, of course, the generous support of our sponsors and donors. So thank you to all of them that have contributed to NEPACMS to keep us going through this time. Please note that tonight's conversation will be recorded for possible rebroadcast as a podcast, which you'll be able to get on our website. As we do go through this conversation, if you do have questions, what we ask you to do is go ahead and put them into the chat section on Zoom. Hopefully we're all familiar with Zoom at the bottom, and we'll try and get to your questions. It's going to be rather like a call-in radio show is the idea. Hopefully we can get to all the questions. I apologize in advance if we run out of time, however. So with that in mind, again, thank you all for being here. Our guests tonight, Wade Preston and Jonathan Weber, I think you can all see them. Thank you guys for being with us. Wade Preston is best known for his role as the piano man in Billy Joel's Broadway hit Movin' Out. He's an original cast member, having done the full 3.5-year run on Broadway and often guested on both national tours. He's credited with having done the show more than anyone, over 1,300 shows, and was the only piano man to do both the principal piano man role and the synth chair at the same time. Wade has just released a CD entitled Lost in the Noise, an eclectic mix of mostly original songs and instrumentals featuring Wade's band and numerous orchestral musicians performing Wade's string arrangements. Jonathan Weber is joining us tonight from New York City. Jonathan enjoys a versatile career as a violinist, violist, conductor, and educator. Mr. Weber has shared the chamber music stage with members of the Orion String Quartet, Windscape, and the Bach Aria Group. He has also performed with Billy Joel, Peter Gabriel, Josh Groban, Taylor Swift, and Alicia Keys, just to name a few. He's an active freelancer in New York, and Mr. Weber performs regularly throughout the Broadway circuit, most recently serving as the principal violinist in the orchestra for Kinky Boots. So thank you both for being here.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
So I thought maybe you both can just give us a quick background of where you come from, how you got started in music. Were you brought up in a musical family? If not, how did you come to have a career in music? So maybe Jonathan, why don't we start with you?
Well, my parents are both musical. They weren't professional musicians. My mother was an amateur pianist, and my father was a trumpet player throughout public school and high school. But they were music lovers, and they would listen to classical music all the time. And by the time I was 3 years old, and I started, whenever I started picking up words I could say, I figured out how to say, play that again, play that again, play that again. I started becoming mesmerized by just everything I was hearing. And then that never stopped. So when I was 7 years old, they figured, all right, maybe we should give him an instrument. So they got me piano lessons, and I hated it with a passion. But my piano teacher was also a violin teacher, and I would see violin students having their lessons sometimes because I would wait in the waiting room and the door would be open. I'd be able to see what was going on. And I fell in love with the sound of a violin. And I also loved the way it looked. There was something about a bow arm, there was something swashbuckler-esque about it. It was like looked like fencing. So, as a 9-year-old, I'm like, that's cool. And finally, I nagged my parents for practically 6 months before they let me switch, because they didn't want to just indulge me. Because it could have just been the type of thing where he's just got a bug, and he'll switch and then he won't want to do that anymore either. But apparently I liked it and I stuck with it. So I switched to the violin when I was 9 years old, and that was it.
Great. And Wade, how about you? Did you always know you were going to be a musician?
Pretty young, I figured out what I wanted to do. My parents brought a piano into the house when I was 4, for my oldest sister. And the moment they brought it into the house, I wouldn't leave it alone. And by the time I turned 5, my mother came into the room where the piano was, and she said, you know, you're in here all the time. You should take lessons. And I said, okay. And fast forward about 3 years later, my mother would periodically come into that same room and say, you know, it's a beautiful day out today, Wade. Don't you think you want to go out and kick a ball around or something like a normal child? You're in here all day. It's not healthy. No, Mom, no. But pretty much right away, I figured out this is what I want to do, you know. I was really drawn to classical, especially classical piano. And you know, starting lessons at 5 and trying to play pieces that were kind of more difficult than somebody who's 5 years old should be attempting to play. Pretty early on, you know, I loved the challenge. It's a little odd that I ended up, you know, becoming like a piano player singer, because I loved classical so much. But I guess I was about 13 or so. I was playing in a bar completely illegally, and I was playing classical pieces, and a guy came up to me and said, "Play piano, man," and he kind of frightened me. And I knew the song, and I played it, and a waitress put a pint glass on the piano, and suddenly people started putting money in it, and something kind of clicked in my head, like, maybe this is the direction to go. But I also feel like the classical gave me chops that other people who do what I do don't have. So, you know, my love for classical piano is still very much with me, even though I'm kind of a piano player, singer, Elton John, Billy Joel kind of guy, Wade Preston kind of guy.
You mentioned Billy Joel, and I know both of you have a common connection with Billy Joel.
That's how we met.
Yeah, and I was hoping you could maybe share that story with us.
I'm curious to hear what John would say. For me, it just Billy, when he did the Shea Stadium concerts, they added a lot of people to the band, 15-piece string ensemble, 5-piece horn section, extra singers, and extra guitarist. And Billy either doesn't like to rehearse, or maybe he was having trouble with his voice at the time. I'm not really sure. But his camp of Tommy Burns primarily said, would you rehearse this band and just play the role of Billy? Why would I say no? And it was great fun. My paycheck, I wish I had the good sense to Xerox it, because it said Stunt Billy in the memo section. And that was my job title. I was the Stunt Billy. And Billy only made halfway through the last rehearsal at SIR, and then halfway through the first sound check at Shea Stadium. And we did a show before that in Hershey Park, because I think it's called Giant Stadium, even though it's not the Giant Stadium that you think of when you hear that. It's the stadium that's in Hershey Park. So they kind of did a test run there. And he barely showed up for the sound checks, right? He just came in to show. So that was fun.
He hates rehearsing.
Yeah, he does not like. Okay, good. I'm glad somebody else said it.
Yeah, no, Tommy told me that, actually. I think he may have told you that too. He said that he doesn't like to rehearse.
Yeah. Well, that's the classic story that David Rosenthal told me when he first joined the band. They played a song, and Billy said, "Do you guys know all the songs that well?" And they said, "Yeah." And he said, "Okay, good. Let's go to lunch." And that was it. Or go to dinner, and that was it. That was like the last rehearsal.
For me, I had listened to Billy Joel my whole childhood, and I was planning on. I'm one of them, right? Exactly.
Shut up,
And I remember when they announced the Shea shows that they were going to have, they were going to have them. I was thinking, all right, I'm totally going to get tickets for that. And then I got a call from a contractor asking if I wanted to play. And I'm thinking, all right, that's better. that's a step up from getting the tickets. So we rehearsed a lot for those shows. We rehearsed for a solid week, if I remember correctly, before
Oh, really?
Billy Joel.
Over the course of a few months, wasn't it?
Well, with the strings were brought in for like the last week, I think.
Okay.
So I remember for us it was a week, because we also weren't in every song. We were in maybe 12 or 13 songs, and we came in, and I remember and met you, and we were all absolutely blown away by how you sounded. I mean, many of us were like, well, we could just do this with him. No, your voice it's sensational. And I'll never forget the very last rehearsal. It was the dress rehearsal that we were in SIR Studios. And in the middle of one of the tunes, all of a sudden, in the middle of the tune, it wasn't your voice anymore.
Yeah.
It was his voice. And the thing is, I think he had been standing by the piano for a little while, but because, he blends in wherever he goes, no one knew he was there. And then all of a sudden, you heard his voice taking over the song. And it was, his voice is distinct because it's that Billy Joel voice. It's like there's only one Billy Joel voice. It's not even a better or worse thing. It's the Billy Joel voice. And it was, that was the moment when all of a sudden everybody was just kind of like, okay, he's ready. He's here to rehearse. So we rehearse another 10 minutes and then we did the show.
Yeah.
Basically. But it was an amazing experience. And we did Hershey Park. We did the Shea shows. And that's where I met Wade, and it was fantastic. It was so much fun.
The one thing I remember about doing sound check at Hershey Park that probably is the thing I remember the most out of that entire experience was doing Innocent Man, which of course the strings were on, and I've got Billy's straight stand, right, standing out in front of this amazing band, and it's this big giant empty stadium, and everything, if you're familiar with Hershey Park, everything beyond it is just these green fields, just I guess farmland, but it's just these green rolling fields. And when I sang the chorus, it echoed like I am for miles and miles, and it just sent chills down my spine. Like, wow, that is the coolest thing I've ever. What? Oh, I'm supposed to be singing, right? Sorry, guys. I will never forget that feeling.
That's so cool. Funny. I'd seen him in concert many, many times, and in Goodnight Saigon in that song, whenever he would get to that lyric when it, be like, and they were sharp, and the lights would come on, the spots, boom, boom, like that. And it would be rhythmical. And I'll never forget when we were doing that song, we were right in front of the spots, literally. So I had the heat of the spots at that moment in the song doing the same rhythmical thing, which, again, what we grew up with, which was wild. Actually, here's a funny story from one of the rehearsals. At one point, we were on a break and he was rehearsing with the band, and he was noodling around on the piano, and he started playing While the Night is Still Young. And this was an incredible moment because, Billy Joel and Billy Joel's band, they're legendary, and, we all play in bands. And that was the moment when I figured out, wow, everybody says the same types of things to each other in band rehearsals, even if you're not famous. It's like exactly the same. So at one point he's playing While the Night is Still Young, and he looks at Tommy and he looks at Dave, and he's like, I think we should put that on the set. And they were like, oh man, come on, no, that's a sleeper. Don't put that on the set. And I'm thinking did you just call While the Night is Still Young a sleeper? Like, I played that 500 times as a kid. And it's incredible. So it's like, they're like, nah, come on.
So did you...
It's an interesting thing too. Billy really, really listened to Tommy. Like Tommy often would say, don't do that or do this. And Billy would listen to him. I always thought that was kind of interesting because Tommy's a childhood friend of mine, and the fact that he had sway over the great Billy Joel. I just thought either that's really cool or what's wrong with this picture? You know? Do you know this guy? Because I do, you know.
So did you guys get to spend much time with him? Get a sense of what kind of a guy he is? I mean, I've always heard stories that he's a kind of down to earth person, but
Well, I certainly did during moving out. I mean, in the early days in Chicago, he hung out a lot and we chatted a lot. Some of the most interesting conversations I've ever had in my life with anybody have been with Billy. But that was because, I was, one of the piano men in his Broadway production. And we had a lot in common. We both spent part of our career in LA before coming back to New York. Both piano players, singers, both loved classical music. He grew up in Hicksville. I grew up in Massapequa Park. They're pretty close to one another. He's a little older than me, so there were some differences. But yeah, I got to hang out with him quite a bit. I found him to be a really interesting guy. Very, very smart, a great sense of humor. Here's the way I would encapsulate Billy Joel, at least from my perspective. And in no way does this encapsulate what Billy really is, in his entirety. I think he's a pretty deep, probably pretty complex person, but I think he's an iconoclastic superstar that wants to be a regular guy, but also realizes he's an iconoclastic superstar and at times likes to, play the rock star card as well, But for the most part, I think he wants to be a regular guy,
I didn't spend too much time with him because we came in, the strings came in later in the production, but spent a little bit of time. Actually, at that time, that was, when was that, 2008? Something like
yes.
that?
Mm-hmm.
I smoked cigarettes at the time. I haven't smoked in a long time since then.
Naughty boy.
I know, it's terrible. But I had a cigarette with him because he was smoking and he really shouldn't have been smoking. He had to sing.
Right. He had quit drinking, and that was the habit he took up in place.
Right. So I
gave him a hard time about it. Wasn't a good idea.
No, during one of the breaks.
Time. Yeah.
At the first rehearsal. At the first rehearsal, during one of the breaks, we were outside and it was just the two of us, and we had a cigarette, and we talked a little bit, and that was delightful. That was actually very, very cool. And yeah, completely down to earth. That was one of the things about seeing him in concert that I always enjoyed about the concerts. You can go to Madison Square Garden and you feel like you're in his living room. It's the biggest living room ever invented, but you're in his living room, and he had this sort of, for those of you familiar with Happy Days, he had this sort of Arthur Fonzarelli vibe about him. He was like the Fonz of rock and roll on stage. Just absolutely, it just cool, just incredibly cool. And the music is, obviously the music is fantastic. So, in my opinion, one of the best lyric writers maybe ever to walk the planet.
And I have to add to that too, that's one of the really great things about Billy. People compare Billy and Elton, but Elton never wrote any lyrics, Even Elton says if you're an Elton John fan, you're a Bernie Taupin fan as well. But Billy did it all, even in the early days, even produced his own records. He wrote the music, he played the hell out of the piano. I obviously, I don't need to say anything more about what an extraordinary voice he is. Great performer, but a great lyricist and a great songwriter. He did it all. He played and accompanied himself on piano. Like one of the last of the greats.
And he's a good lyric writer also, because if you just read the lyrics without the music, they're still good.
They're great stories. Yeah.
They work.
So Wade, I know that you basically played Billy Joel on Broadway in the musical. How did you both get started in Broadway? John, I know you're a classically trained violinist. How did that come to you? Did you early on think that you wanted to play Broadway, or you just happen to fall upon it?
It all happened during a period of time when I was adding things to the classical music genre in my life. And so my feeling was there was never anything I didn't want to do. Like if it came my way, I would do it. Especially in this industry, you have to work. There's no, as Dustin Hoffman said in Tootsie, there's no excuse for not working. We have to stay employed the best we can. And so with Broadway, you start off basically as a sub. So some people I knew who were on Broadway brought me in to some shows, and you start off as a sub. You don't audition to be a sub. The first show you play is the audition, and you don't get to rehearse with the band. You get to go in, you get to sit in the pit and audit one show. So you're sitting in a chair with the score, and you have headphones, and you're not just listening to the show. You're analyzing the vibe of the pit, the musicians. You're analyzing the chemistry of the band, because when you go in and play a show, you have to basically seamlessly transition into the person's role that you're subbing for. You need to basically become a sort of a clone of them musically. So it's stressful, but it's also enjoyable. Like I like the puzzle. I actually enjoy that analysis process and kind of like diagnosing all of the different facets of what's going on in there. So your first show is basically your audition show. You play the show, and you might get a note or two, but you basically find out afterwards if you're going to continue to be a sub. And that's how that works. And then one thing led to another. All of a sudden, I started subbing on a bunch of shows. And it's sort of like, it's like a Navy SEAL operation. You're going in, you have to sniper shot the show, and then you leave. You might not even play that show again for about a month, or you play it 10 times a month. It's very, random. And then after a few years, I became a replacement player on Kinky Boots, which was one of the first shows I subbed on back in 2013. And then I became a full-timer there. So that's the short version of that.
Wow. And so, as a classical violinist, I've sometimes played in pit orchestras for musicals or operas, and, you'd have a run of an opera, say, for a weekend. And, the first performance is kind of exciting. The second one, kind of getting a little bit drained. By the third one, it's a little bit exciting, but I'm ready to kind of go on to something new. What's it like to play a show, multiple times a week? For how many years were you doing Kinky Boots? What kind of goes through your head?
Well, from the time I was including the amount of times I subbed on Kinky Boots, which was a lot, and then going full time, which exponentially increased the amount. I mean, I probably played the show 1,500 times at least total, and the way I treat it, it's a discipline. I go into every performance, I treat it like it's Game 7 of the World Series, and you've got to win that game. And I try to I try to reboot my entire mindset every time, and literally it's just Game 7 of the World Series, bottom of the ninth. Got to win the game. And that's how I do it. It's hard. And the thing is, once the show starts to get in your DNA. You're not really looking at the music anymore. I mean, it's there, but you're not really looking at it. But you still treat it the same. And one of the reasons for that is, you've played it 1,000 times, but the audience hasn't seen it 1,000 times. You're in the service industry, and you have to give them the best product you can possibly give them, no matter how many times you've done it. So it's a game you play with yourself to try to stay in that focus.
And Wade, you were singing on Broadway, 1,300 shows about? What is that?
Yeah, a little more than that. As best we could tell, somewhere around 1,330. The number that came up more than once when John Scarpula and I tried to figure out just how many shows I did was 1,333, which I thought was kind of cool. But I don't know if that's exactly accurate, but somewhere around there. Yeah. As far as getting bored with the show, I never did. I mean, I love the music, but I also have a similar philosophy. I had a piano teacher when I was very young who said, there's nothing so good that can't be improved. And that is what was on my mind for every show. How can I make this one a little bit better than the last one? So I never found myself drifting off like this is boring or, you know, same old, same old. I just found myself just perpetually wanting to do a better job than I did the night before. And you know, it was an exciting gig. I mean, I'm a piano player, singer. You know, up until that point, I had done a number of concerts playing my own music, but the vast majority of my experiences were in bars and restaurants, private parties, weddings, you know, bum, bum, bum. But so when Tommy Burns called me up and said, "How would you like to play Billy Joel on Broadway?" I didn't have to think about it. I was like, why would I say no to that? I mean, you know, it wasn't like he was asking me to join some obscure band or a band with a famous person where I kind of knew, you know, it would be taking a chance. This was like, well, that sounds really cool, and you know, and I know that's something I could do. I mean, I'm not an actor or a dancer. You know, I don't really consider myself a Broadway kind of guy, but that role I fit. And so, you know, I mean, they auditioned the hell out of me, and they kind of messed with my head a little bit psychologically. But ultimately I got the gig, and it really was a great challenge. Here's the story too. They auditioned me 5 times, right? I was living in California at the time. So I kept flying back and forth and auditioning for them. And one of the general accountant lady, I don't want to say her name because I don't want to say her name, but she said, "Well, we didn't think you were quite right as the piano man, but you're the best keyboard player who auditioned out of anybody. So would you like to be the keyboard player in the band?" And me, in my naivety, I just said, "Well, yeah, sure. That sounds like a lot less pressure. Okay, you know, okay, we're all going to meet in Chicago on this day. Get your affairs in order, and, you know, plan on moving to Chicago for a few months and then to New York." Okay. And when I got to Chicago, the day of the first rehearsal, they said, "Oh, by the way, you're also the #2 piano man."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "What? It would have been nice if you had told me." So, you know, doing the synth book was not that hard, but I really wasn't prepared for the piano man chair. So I had to learn it in just a few days and convince Twyla that I could do it. And I had a lot of help from Stuart Molina, who is now the Harrisburg Symphony Orchestra.
Oh, I know Stuart.
That's right. Yeah, I've played under him a number of times. I used to sub in the Harrisburg Symphony. Yeah.
Isn't he? I love Stuart. Yeah. I love his whole family.
He's a great guy. He's a great guy.
I love the Harrisburg Symphony Orchestra. I've become friends with a lot of them. But he helped me because I kind of had my own. I kind of had my own take on some of the things, and what Twyla was looking for was specific things so that the dancers didn't have a train wreck. You know, they're listening for specific things, specific timing. And so he basically just walked me through the whole thing. Here's what she's expecting to hear. And, you know, it worked. He really helped me, but, you know, it definitely having a work ethic helped. I mean, I was like, I'm not going to lose this gig because that woman whose name I won't mention didn't tell me that I had the part. They all knew I had the part, but she didn't want to tell me because what I found out years later was they didn't tell me because if they had told me, then they would have had to pay me to rehearse on my own.
Oh man!
And so,
right?
Wait,
Yeah.
just to be kind of clear, can you explain what you mean by the synth book? Playing the synth?
Oh yes. The Moving Out Band was a 10-piece band, and there was a 4-piece horn section, drums, bass, 2 guitars, piano man, and a synth player. So the synth book was the charts for the synthesizer for the show. Magnificently scored out by Dave Rosenthal. Did a great job. But there was no book for the Piano Man. That was like, you have to learn this, and you have to do it by ear, which really wasn't a problem for me. It was just, I just would have liked to have had more time, you know. But yeah, the synth book was just, you know, a book of charts for the synth. There were 2 keyboards in that band, the Piano Man and the synth.
Yeah.
And by the way, if I may brag, there were a couple of times where the synth player didn't show up, or the other piano man didn't show up, and I was the only guy who was able to do the piano man and the synth chair at the same time, and I'm really proud of that. So sometimes, you know, back in the days when we used to do concerts, remember those? Wow, way back when. I liked doing I like doing both chairs at the same time. It's a lot of fun. I don't know anybody else who does that. So yay me.
So I know you said that part of the reason you got the gig was because you had the best piano chops, and I imagine that goes back to your classical training. And a question from our audience: do you keep up with your classical playing? I mean, this goes, I think, for both of you. And if so, do you think? I mean, how does your classical training help you with staying fresh and playing on Broadway?
You want to fill this one first?
I want to hear what you have to say. Actually, I know my answer.
Well, you know, this is an interesting thing. So I've worked on 16 Broadway shows in my career now, and every show is different. Some are a lot more strenuous than others. So depending on the show you're working on, it's very important to keep your classical playing going. Otherwise, things start to atrophy a little bit. So one thing, I mean, I teach at Queens College. So I'm always at least dealing with teaching classical playing, and I always maintain freelancing in the classical scene while working on Broadway as well. But I will say, when I was working full-time at Kinky Boots, the show, it's not a very strenuous physical show. So that show in particular, you have to really make sure you're playing other things to keep yourself in shape, to keep everything, you know. And classical music, I mean, by the way, Broadway and rock and all of those things, they are all challenging in their own ways. They all have, I mean, you know, rhythmically, stylistically, classical playing is definitely more calisthenic than some Broadway shows, with the exception of, I will say, Phantom of the Opera and Finding Neverland. Those are 2 particular shows where the violin book it's meaty. And I used to love, I mean, I love every show that I play, but with those 2 shows in particular, I would always feel like I was getting all the food groups into my playing every time I play the show. And so that's a different type of thing. So basically you need to, the short answer to the question is, it's important to keep everything in shape while doing all of this stuff.
That's a really good way of putting it. And my you know, the vast majority of the performances that I do are well, a lot more eclectic. But if I haven't been playing for a while, it shows. You know, I try to sit down and go through some of the more technically difficult, some of the technically more trying pieces. I do a lot of scales just to keep in shape. I agree with John. It would seem to me that if you are doing the same show and that's all you're doing, after a while, that's all you can play. You know, after a while, your chops will leave you. You know, this came up last night. I was chatting with a friend of mine who was commenting on my falsetto, and that was one thing that I really tried to balance, because the show, when I was doing the show, all my entire career up until that point, I liked using both my falsetto and my full voice and kind of going back and forth between them to the point where sometimes it was difficult to tell the difference. But I could sing the same note in falsetto or in full voice, and it would have a slightly different color. So it would give me options as far as the kind of sound that was coming out of my voice. But they wanted me to just sing everything full voice. So I found after a while that my falsetto was beginning to get weak. So, you know, when I had a few days, I mean, 8 shows a week over the course of 6 days, you know, that Monday when the theaters are dark, you just want to sleep,
Yeah.
you know, but I would still try to find opportunities to sing, you know, to warm up my voice and work on my falsetto and try to do that thing where I would go back and forth between the two, because I found that I was beginning to lose that, you know, by just doing everything in full voice and doing the same show night after night. But then again, at the same time, moving out, the piano man is the narrative. The piano man is, you know, like a normal Broadway show. You've got a number of different people all singing their own songs. So, you know, if you're a character in a show, you'll be singing a few songs, but you're not singing every single song for 2 hours. So there I am singing every song, and I'm really a baritone, and I'm singing all this upper Billy Joel range stuff 2 hours a night over the course of 6 days, 8 shows over the course of 6 days. That definitely gave me some chops as well. That was quite a workout.
Did you ever find that did you ever have to take songs down a couple steps, being a baritone, from Billy Joel's originals?
Not back then, no. That would require the whole band to transpose, and that just was not going to happen. You know what I mean? We had the show down. If it suddenly was like, hey guys, can we do everything a half step lower? They would have just said, no, you know? But having said that, now, you know, sometimes I do take advantage of the fact that, you know, I'm usually the one in charge. So I tell the bass player and the guitarist, you know, bring 2 guitars and tune 1 to E flat, because if I'm feeling a little tired, I may ask you to do a song a half step down. But, you know, when I was doing that show, I didn't have that luxury.
So maybe we can bring things up a little bit closer to the present. You know, January 2020, what were you guys doing? You see where I'm going with this, right?
I was desperately trying to finish my CD. That was my obsession, you know.
Which you did, and I gotta say it's wonderful. And we'll put a link to our website, on our website to yours, so that anyone who wants to can either download or buy the CD there. But
thank you.
Sorry, continue.
Yeah, I'm really proud of it. And John and his lovely wife Amy are both on it. There's, I think, 7 songs that include strings, and I love writing for string quartet. In fact, the very last piece is just a string quartet, and I love that. I love that format. So yeah, so that's really a pleasure. That was really a pleasure to be able to write out my own string arrangements and then conduct them. which was really great fun. And you guys are great about it.
I should mention too that was recorded locally, because you're now located in Dunmore, and we did that up. I don't remember what the town
Lake
is.
Ariel.
Lake Ariel.
Well, you can either say Jefferson Township or Lake Ariel, but it's that area of Moscow. It's Windmill Agency Studios. It's now I live a whopping 18 minutes from the studio. You know, and I'm already working on the next CD. And you know, it's a state-of-the-art studio, and Eric Ritter is a wonderful engineer and a great guy to work with, and has a tremendous work ethic. And he loves the craft, you know. I mean, he when he and I started working together, we just bonded immediately because we both had that same enthusiasm for the art form, you know. And so I feel very lucky that I landed where I did, and then was introduced to Steve Kurilla on drums and John Ventry on bass and Eric Ritter at Windmill Agency, you know, kind of have all the elements I needed to build, you know, Lost in the Noise. And so in January, actually, I started it in March of last year. In January, I was, you know, still hard at work. And I think Amy came in, I think, was it January or February of this year? It was right around the time when.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
March. I remember because you had asked me to come in again, and I was driving back from Orlando at the time.
Yeah.
That was right before the big lockdown. So John, what were you up to in January? I know Kinky Boots closed in April of 2019. Is that correct?
Yeah. In January, I was in the throes of subbing on, I was rotating between 6 different Broadway shows. So I was basically just going wherever I was sent to. And I was on a break I was in between semesters teaching at the Aaron Copland School of Music. And yeah, just working, basically. Not thinking we were going to be in the situation we're in right now at that point.
Who could have imagined?
Yeah. Not even in a million years.
What is the situation for a Broadway musician now? And where do you see things coming back? What are your expectations for the future?
Well, right now, Broadway is, I mean, it's shut down completely. So there is no, until further notice, and has been since March. At the moment, they say that will be no shows until after January 1st. That doesn't mean there will be right after January 1st. That there will definitely not be between now and then. And at the moment, there's really no telling exactly what's going to happen. On a personal note, I don't see it opening up until the spring for a number of reasons. One, January would be a kind of a weird time to open anyway, because it's the most dead time of the year for Broadway. Secondly, there's going to be a lot of prep that would have to happen to get shows running again. So there's going to be that period of time that's going to have to take place. And also, the reality is not that much has changed as far as defense against COVID. So the reality is, I mean, things could open up again, but the reason for closing down hasn't changed. So it's tricky, and it's very hard on Broadway right now because it's a gigantic ecosystem. I mean, I forget the exact number, but I want to say there are about 1,200 musicians working on Broadway. That includes subs. So it's a gigantic ecosystem. And right now, the ecosystem, it's just like radio silence. Nobody, a lot of even subbing is based on momentum. Once being present, being in the scene. So it's like, it's daunting actually, having the lights shut down like this.
I mean, in January, how often were you subbing for somebody? I mean, what was if you had a permanent seat on Broadway, were you playing 50% of the time, 80% of the time? Because it seems like there's just this culture of weaving in and out between subs and regular, and there's this institutional knowledge, I guess, that I don't know, do you think that might be lost because of all that's happened?
I think it's going to change drastically when it comes back, because for starters, the chairholders, well, first let me answer the first part of your question. So there's a rule in the contract, there's a stipulation, you are entitled to sub out a maximum of 50% of the shows you play per year. Most people don't do that because, first of all, you need the income, and every show you play, part of the payment of that show goes towards benefits with the local 802 Musicians Union. So there are lots of reasons why you want to work, but very often you could sub out to take another gig, to take another job. So, I mean, the average person, you know, if you're playing 8 shows a week, you'll sub out once or twice, sometimes 3 times, but usually once or twice. You'll play 6 out of the 8 for a number of reasons. First of all, you want to keep your subs fresh. You got to keep them coming in, because if they don't feel like they're going to be called, they're not going to be available anymore. So you have to have a little bit of a rotation going on with there. But as far as, okay, what was the, I lost my train of thought. I apologize. What was, what did I interrupt myself with? What was the first thing I started saying?
You know, going forward, do you think that that culture is going to survive? Do you think it's going to change? And if so, how?
Okay, so when people come back to work eventually, first of all, I don't think everything's going to open up at once. I think they're going to slow play it, and I think they're going to have to ease back in. And the full timers, the people who are shareholders, they're going to need to work. They're not going to be in a position where they can sub that much, because there's going to be a lot less work in the freelance industry because of this. And secondly, they're going to have to catch up for the 6 months lost. So, and to get their health insurance back. So all sorts of things. So basically it's going to be a trickle down operation. And I think it's going to be, not to be discouraging, I think it's going to be a very slow process. And I think it also has to be for health reasons. I mean, there's going to have to be a lot of testing, in a sense. And I don't just mean COVID testing. I mean, they're going to have to test to see what works. A lot of the articles I've read having to do with also social distancing in audiences, Broadway shows can't really do that because they rely on packed houses for the revenue, because there are so many expenses that go into putting on a big show. Things that you would never even think of are expensive going into that, having nothing to do with just like utilities and the rent. There are so many people working that there's a reason why if a show's half filled, it doesn't stay open. It doesn't work, they close. And they're also, I can't see them tripling the price of tickets so that you can have a half a filled house. So it's a very tricky process, and it has to be done very organized. So it's hard to predict exactly how things are going to look. I mean, I am optimistic in the sense I know that people are working very, very hard to come up with a plan and to account for all contingencies. I mean, there are possibilities of downsizing shows to make it so that the expenses aren't as high. There are lots of things being discussed, but it's extremely tricky. And this is like one of the worst possible things that could ever happen to the industry, because it's also the last industry that comes back when you have something like this, when you have a situation like this. So,
Wade, I know you were playing a lot of concerts, a lot of gigs before this. How's your life changed? What are you doing now? What are you doing these days? I know you said you're working on a new album.
Yeah. When the whole COVID thing hit and everything closed down, including the studio that I was recording in, my CD wasn't finished yet, so I didn't have anything to promote during that time. And I got pretty depressed. I slept for 2 months, basically. I didn't know what else to do, you know. I could have used that time to practice. I could have used that time to compose, but I wasn't enthused to do anything. I didn't feel creative, you know. I felt so bummed because it just seemed so, you know, it didn't have to be this way, kind of thing. And so when the studio opened back up and I did have the opportunity to finish this record, it really lifted my spirits. And I found myself in a real kind of creative, you know, on a creative role. And that hasn't stopped. So in answer to your question, I have had the opportunity to do some private events, mostly solo, socially distanced, of course. but with the Broadway street cred, those types of gigs pay quite handsomely. So, so financially, I've been okay. I had a bit of a rainy day fund that got me through it as well. But in reality, my solo concerts and moving out band concerts, and I had a couple of concerts planned with the Wade Preston band with additional musicians.
That's right. I was going to play a concert with you too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tens of thousands of dollars of revenue lost. And one of those shows has been rescheduled for, I think, June or July of next year. So it really did devastate my concert income, and the vast majority of my income is performing. So it really hit me in the gut. But being on a creative role and kind of getting that energy back, the fact that I've gotten a lot of good feedback about this CD, and you know, I have access to this wonderful studio and wonderful musicians and a great engineer. I just am throwing myself into the creative process and trying to I've been writing, and also over the past few days, since I moved, I was able to get everything out of storage, and in storage were my old ADATs. Remember ADATs, gentlemen? For you younger folk out there, ADATs are, you used to record on giant 2-inch reels that had 14 minutes of analog, 8 tracks of analog recording. And in the 90s, suddenly there was this digital revolution, and these machines called ADATs. There were also machines called D88s. I didn't use those, but ADATs, you used a video cassette to record 8 channels of digital, 42 minutes of digital, 8 tracks of digital recording. So that was how I made my, one of my first CDs. And all the masters are in a giant Tupperware bin, and I had my ADATs as well. So one of the things I decided to do was, hey, listen, while we're in the interim, let's transfer all of this digital stuff from my ADATs before the video cassettes, decompose onto digital, so that I have all that stuff. So, as all those tapes kind of wither away, I'll still have all of those tracks. And what I discovered was there were a bunch of songs on there that I had recorded with my band that I don't even remember writing. And so I've discovered all of this original material that I didn't even know I had. And that's exciting, because dare I say, some of those tunes are actually pretty good. And so that was a wonderful surprise. So I've got lots of creative stuff and fun things to keep me busy for a while we're still not really up and running. I'm not optimistic about the future, quite frankly, at the moment. I don't think things are going to come back anytime soon. I think the theaters are not only dealing with the fact that they have to be, there's the socially distancing thing, which, as John said, doesn't work for a theater. Moving out was at 70% when they closed. I would think, if you could continue to do 70%, you'd be doing pretty good. But they kind of felt like at that point it was time to quit, which, gives you an idea of just how badly they want to just have a packed house every night. How that actually works into the business model.
And tourism is going to be down for a while.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, and people's fear. I mean, especially New Yorkers, who are definitely aware of the need to socially distance and wear masks and things like that. I don't think they want to crowd into a theater, even after they get the green light. It's like, well, we're really not sure if we want to do that. So I think it's going to be a while before things get back to normal. And when they do get back to normal, I say in air quotes, things are going to be different. You know, a lot of those restaurants aren't going to be there anymore. It's so strange to cross the George Washington Bridge and see like half of the lights of the skyline not on. So I think that the future is very uncertain. So for me, rather than let that get to me, I just want to use that time to write and record and try to get as much, you know, original stuff out there as I can. You know, I have kind of a financial buffer, and I have clients, for lack of a better way to say it, that hire me from time to time to do private events that help me pay the bills. So that's what I see my future as right now. I want to dive headfirst back into just being a songwriter. I want to work really hard on these things, you know, and just when it is time to get back out there performing, I want to be the animal I was before, you know, like John was talking about. It's funny, you're both named John, but John Weber, Mr. Weber, sir, was
I thought I looked around. I thought my father was behind me.
Yeah. Jonathan was commenting. I do a boogie version of America from West Side Story on this record, and it's quite a workout. You know, and if I'm not in shape, that one's pretty hard to play. So you know, I want to get. And if I continue to work on it, even I'm even surprised at what I'm able to do. You know, you're like, as a child, that's all I wanted to do was play the piano and practice, and I'm doing that now. You know, so that when time comes, I want to be as badass as I can possibly be. So yeah. I don't see my concerts coming back anytime soon. They pay handsomely, you know, and they really help me keep everything going financially. But right now, I just try to keep my spirits up and keep the creative juices flowing, keep my fingers in shape, try to lose some of the COVID pizza belly syndrome, you know, and just keep my spirits up, you know, and nothing keeps my spirits up more than composing.
You know, if I could piggyback onto that, this is also exactly. This is also, it's interesting. This is, you know, like you said when you said you were finding yourself sleeping a lot, and this is depressing. This is depressing. This is a very there are so many facets to how this is impacting us, our lifestyle, not just our finances and our careers, but just our mental lifestyle. Like I'm the type of person, I love being at home, but I love being out. I love being engaged in the world, in society, in our community, in our musical community, all of these things. That's something that I happen to enjoy very much. It's a sort of sustenance in a way. It's like a nourishment. And
it's one of the things I really loved about John. He's a very gregarious and friendly, sociable kind of person, you know. And when we met, it was like instantly like, this guy's cool, you know.
Yeah, no, we was like we did know each other for years.
Yeah, exactly.
But the thing about this also, no, not at all, not at all. I appreciate that, and likewise. No, the thing that was interesting though. So that being said, I want to mention something that actually I feel is positive in a sense. This is also a unique opportunity. I mean, I would never want this situation to create this kind of unique opportunity because it's horrifying and terrible, but it's also a unique opportunity in a person's adult life. It's very rare in your entire lifetime when the entire world gets put on hold, like literally just everything, it's paused, where you have an enormous amount of time to actually do certain things that you never had time to do before. Like for example, even with practicing and playing, this is an opportunity to take certain things back to formula and revamp certain things in one's own mechanics, which you can't really do unless you have time to let things kind of cook. So if you're constantly performing, you can't really take apart your playing and then go play a show 3 days later because, you know, nothing works. So you can really, this is kind of unique in that way. It's an opportunity. also about to learn other things, to learn other skills. So like I've been doing more home recording, video recording, and audio engineering during this time, partially because we have to. I actually had I had 2 gigs during this last 6 months, and one of them, and this is going to segue into something that Wade and I had a revelation about just a few days ago. So I did some musical extra work on the TV show The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel for season 3, and I was in about 4 episodes, and they recently put out a video having to do with the music from that season, and they had a bunch of us record some of the songs from home. And this is basically, it's a shout out to the fans. It's an appreciation of the fans, and during this horrible time. So they had shots of us playing in quarantine, and then it would cut to us playing the same song that we played on the show during some scenes. So that was fun because for a couple of days, actually, I kind of felt like a working musician again. It was only a couple of days. Recently, I discovered Wade and I were in the same exact episode 3 of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, season 3. We were in the same episode. I had no idea he was in the episode. We were in different scenes, but Wade was on the show too.
Volare, oh, yeah, I got to play a 1960s lounge singer. Oh man, that was fun.
He looked fantastic. He looked fantastic. And I was in Shy Baldwin's band. I was a violinist in his band.
That was great.
Incredible.
Yeah, what an odd coincidence. Yeah, that was a wonderful experience. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I was going to add something to that too. I can't remember what it was though. It had something to do with working on your chops, and yeah, I mean, yeah, it's true. I mean, now that my spirits have been kind of lifted, and the CD is out, and it's kind of doing its own thing for me. And now I have the opportunity to really work on things because I've got the time, So I would say to those of you out there who do, the kind of stuff that we do, or something similar, or if you play an instrument, don't do what I did. Don't let it get to you. You can use this time to actually really focus on really advancing your craft and your chops, because you're right. My analogy to what you were saying is, if you are out gigging all the time, those more difficult pieces that you're playing, after a while, you begin to kind of forget some certain aspects of your technique, of your articulation. Sometimes even, the notes kind of find a way to change over time without you realizing it, because, we're human. We're not exacting computers. We don't play the exact same way every night. And so what happens, my analogy is, it's like making a Xerox of something, and then making a Xerox of that Xerox, and then a Xerox of that Xerox. And then after a while, you can't even read it, right? Because it kind of degenerates. So you have to come home and retune it every so often. So if you're out gigging all the time, that's a really difficult thing to do. But right now, providing you have a place to live, and I consider us to be very fortunate that, we're not in a dreadful position that so many people in this country are in right now, through no fault of their own. That this is an opportunity for you to really, kick some ass on building up your technical abilities and perfecting whatever it is you want to show off to your audience.
So I think we'll probably want to wrap things up pretty soon here. Just a reminder, if anyone out there still wants to ask a question, just go ahead and send that through the chat feature here. Taking the optimistic perspective, looking forward, someone that's younger that wants to get into the Broadway scene, what advice would you give them? What's the path forward to having a career in Broadway?
That's a very interesting question.
Considering the time we're in, yeah.
There
Yeah.
are a lot of answers to that. Also, it depends
Yeah.
on whether you want to be above ground or below ground in the theater. I work below ground. He works above
I'm
ground.
sure it's a very, very different process, right? And just personally, the only time I've been in a Broadway pit was when I got to see Kinky Boots, and John took us, Amy and I, backstage, and that was great. I'd never been backstage on the Broadway pit, but I imagine the process is different. So, as an instrumentalist, how does one tap into that scene?
Well, so this is the thing, because of the fact that they don't post job openings to sub. It's basically who is already working on Broadway. It is a little tricky because you don't want to be too aggressive. You also don't want to be not aggressive enough. You have to somehow be present and on people's radar. But at the same time, if you're pushy, it's a turnoff. And so there's a lot of taking of the temperature of the situations and just reading, as we say, reading the rooms to know. It's not so much about what you do, it's about what you don't do. So I would say for orchestras on Broadway, first of all, it helps if you do know somebody who is there. And you can always just express interest to that person that, if they ever need somebody, you can do that. And there's no guarantee that they'll be able to, because very often people who are working on Broadway are have subs coming in that they owe favors to because they got them on Broadway, things like that. So there is an hierarchy and an ecosystem. So what I would say is, let's say you get invited to sub on a show, to watch a book and then play your first show. I would say the most important thing to think about when you're doing that, if you want to stay in that business, is remember that it's not about you. It's about serving the show. Your job is to serve the show. Your job is not to let everybody know how great you are. You need to go in and, in a way, not stand out on either direction as a sub. That's musically. Also, to a certain extent, socially. You have to be a chameleon when you go into those situations. You've got to blend in. You could be the most incredible player in the world, and if you go in and you're coming on a little bit too strong socially, that could be a turnoff, and people don't want to work with you. So you have to be yourself, but you also, because obviously you can't be micromanaging every move you make. But the most important thing is to read the room and to blend. So you want to be present. You don't want to be overly present. Musically, you want to make sure that the show sounds the way the show is supposed to sound when you're not there, when you're there. You have to sound like the player who you're subbing for. You can't go in being competitive. You have to be about the craft, and you have to serve the show and serve the craft. And I think when you go in doing that and you're showing that kind of respect for the production and for the players you're playing with, who are there all the time, it's their ship. You're a guest on their ship, even though you're serving the show. It's noticed. I think it's noticed. And I think, and the word starts to get out that you're a good adaptive player, and you're also easy to work with. And those are the types of, that's how you get some steady work in the business. But breaking in initially, that you have to have patience for. You can't come on like gangbusters to try to get in, because first of all, it's a very small world, it's a very small community, and the word gets out pretty fast who's doing that and who's not, because everybody talks. So it's patience, it's calmness, and when it's appropriate, if you think you could talk to somebody and just tell them you're interested, let them know and then leave it alone for a while. They won't forget that you asked.
Wade, I imagine if you want to be a Broadway star, you don't want to be a chameleon. You want to stand out? What's your experience?
Well, it's a little tricky for me personally because it's not really something I'm pursuing. You know, I'm not thinking about starring in a Broadway show. You know, I'm thinking about starring in my own show, my own concert. You know, and not necessarily Broadway at all. You know, but I would say to piggyback Mr. Weber's comments. One of my favorite lines in Amadeus, which for you young people was a movie that came out some time ago about Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Mozart said, I'm not the only composer in Vienna, but I'm the best. And I forget the other character, he said, a little modesty would become you. And I think that's
that was the emperor. Advice. The emperor said that.
Yeah. Modesty is most becoming. You can know in your heart that you're really good, but if you're modest about it, that will only make you more endearing. Your talent will shine through, you know. I think you play piano? Yeah. Well, play something, you know. The moment you sit down and play something, it's really obvious. It's like, oh, this guy definitely knows how to play, you know. But you don't have to be, yeah, I'm great, you know. Just I play, I play a little, and then play fantasy impromptu, and wow, I guess you really do play. I guess you took lessons. They found me.
This just became Mr. Robinson's neighborhood. Okay, boys and girls, I got to go.
We had a concept in the Moving Out band though. You have to be able to play, but the hang is equally as important, and sometimes maybe even more so. Greg Smith used to say it was the, are you just regular mustard or are you Grey Poupon? Yeah, and the band could sense it collectively, whether or not when a new sub came in, whether or not they were going to survive, because we could tell right away if they were going to be able to do the hang. If they came in and they were like, I'm great, I'm the best, they didn't last a week.
And you don't even need to say that. You could tell by the body language. You could tell by the style, by the playing. Like sometimes the playing is overly aggressive. There's so many indicators of when you could tell somebody's sensitive and they get it, and someone who absolutely just does not know what they're doing in the room. It's incredible. They don't even have to open their mouth sometimes.
If a guitarist would come in and he would start throwing shapes, you know what that means, right?
Throwing shapes? Oh, God.
Like I'm a total rock star.
Right.
They were out of there in no time. Like, you do not do that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, a bit of modesty and knowing that it's not, it's not about you, and it's, you are simply contributing to a group effort that is basically owned by these guys, and you can either, modestly make your way into it and do the best job you can and not be a jerk, or you can be like, hey man, I'm the best, and guess what, we don't care.
Right. Nobody's bigger than the game.
You could be one of the best musicians ever, but if you're a jerk, you know what, there's lots of other people out there that are really good too, so bye-bye.
Yeah. And also playing in a pit is like, it's like being on a hockey team versus playing tennis. When you're on a hockey team, you have to know, you have to know when to shoot the puck. But you also have to know when to lay back and play defense. You have to know when to be a supporting player. Your job is to help make the group work. And that takes to be honest, that's a lot of thinking. I mean, like, you have to want to do this to do that, because there is effort that goes into it. I happen to really enjoy that aspect of it because, like, I don't know if anyone's familiar with like House MD, diagnostic medicine. Like, I actually really enjoy figuring out the scene and making it work. I take pleasure in that, and being part of it. And I also love playing. One of the reasons I love playing chamber music, I did play ice hockey as a kid, and I ended up going on with music because I had to choose either hockey or the violin, and so I went with the profession where I get to keep my teeth. And
Violin versus violence.
exactly,
I would always
exactly.
choose violin over
Yes,
violence.
yes. So that's the thing. It's like I enjoy that interaction. I enjoy that. I enjoy the team concept a lot. Now I know how to solo as well. I mean, I know how to do it, and I enjoy doing that too. But I really enjoy being part of a team also.
I think from my own experience too. I mean, after a while, people stopped asking me if I wanted to be part of an ensemble or part of a band because they knew that I was doing my own thing and they assumed that I wouldn't be interested. But certainly for many years in the earlier part of my career, it was balanced with also backing up other people. So being a band member is very different than being a front man, and I think it's really good to be able to have both experiences because it gives you a more well-rounded concept of how the whole machine is working. If you're a keyboard player in a band, sometimes it's better just to hold that pad than to let there be Wade. And I think that's a really good experience to have both of them. But if you are aspiring to do orchestral work or band work, and the vast majority of musicians are sidemen, that's a whole nother art form, I think, and sometimes maybe even a bit more difficult than being the front man. I mean, for me, when I'm front man, it's just let there be Wade. Maniacal boogie, and I'm the showman, I'm the front man, I'm the flashy piano player guy.
And that's appropriate. That's appropriate because that's the role.
Yeah.
That's the thing. The entire machine has different roles, and those roles have to be solid, whatever they are. I think one of the big issues is when people don't realize what role they're in, and they try to play a different one in that moment, and it's like nah,
it doesn't work.
nah.
Yep. Hey,
Well,
Mr. Vida, I'm curious. The picture in the bottom right has changed. Is our audience still out there, or are we just talking with ourselves? And if we are, we should be having cocktails.
No, our audience is still with us.
Oh, good.
I think it's about time to maybe perhaps wrap things up. But
I have to say, I was hoping to hear more questions. But it's not my show, so I'm sorry. I don't mean to play backseat host.
Sure. If I'll put a last call for questions if anyone does have any. And let me remind you too, again, we're going to put a link on our website to Wade's website where you can get his CD and hopefully his next recording too. When's that supposed to come out?
Oh, I don't know. I just started.
Yeah.
I mean, I never put a due date on Lost in the Noise because when it was ready, and it turned out it took almost a year and a half. Of course, part of that was due to COVID, but this next project, I don't think it's going to take quite as long, but I don't really know. I have a concept. I've got about 5 songs. But when I put out a CD, I like for it to be about an hour of music. I'm not one of those, 40 minutes of music on a CD guys. I want to fill the thing up. I always feel like I'm backlogged with original material anyway. So we'll see. I would think probably by the end of next year.
Okay.
But as far as wadepreston.com is concerned, the front page, the first page doesn't have the link on it, but virtually every other page does. And if you do get the CD, the liner notes as a downloadable PDF is on like 1 or 2 of the pages. I'm still trying to navigate how to do my own website, and it's very different than the early days of websites when everything was so simple. Now everything is code and kind of above my ability to comprehend. But just hunt around and you can find the downloadable version. You can order a CD. The name of the company is Kanaki, and it will take you to that website. And there's also a free downloadable PDF of the liner notes, and that includes details, lyrics, a very long thank you list, and just a brief story as to how the whole concept of Lost in the Noise came about in the first place.
Well, if you need help with the website, I'm sure I can find a very talented web designer who's upstairs right now to help you out.
Upstairs, right near the "Come From Away" sign. Right,
Exactly.
Upstairs, right there.
I hadn't thought of that. You're right. Yeah, I should talk to Amy about that. Yeah.
And then for all of you, John has been a good friend of NEPACMS for quite a while, and as well as his wife, Miho. John's played on our series 2 or 3 times at least, I know. I think most recently was at the January benefit we did in 2019. Yeah. And he was a real trooper. He got up at 3:30 in the morning, which is usually when he goes to bed, to come and play on the morning show. That was quite an experience.
We have owl DNA.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
So, well, thank you guys so much for being here. This was a lot of fun. And
thank you for having us. This was a blast.
Thank you for being a part of this, our first experience with Music Matters and being our first guinea pigs here. Thank you for everyone who joined us tonight. Again, you can find more information on the programs we're going to be doing this fall. We're doing more conversations. Our next one is a workshop with cellist Teddy Buchholz, who's also a friend of NEPACMS. And we're going to be also putting out a couple more pre-recorded performances like we did last week. So stay tuned with that. Make sure you're signed up for the newsletter. And we hope to be in touch with you and see you guys very soon. So have a good night, everybody.
Thank you so much. Stay safe.
Bye.